Hey everyone, quick message before we get into this episode. We're not going anywhere, but we wanted to let everyone know that this will be the last episode of the OLIF podcast as it currently exists. Anton and I have decided to pivot and completely rebrand OLIF.
After I stopped publishing the magazine, JP and I wanted to continue with the podcast. We believe that this is some of the greatest content that we've put out. So going forward with our new platform, it will be changed from OLIF to Lifting Curve.
Lifting Curve is an idea of ours to develop weightlifting education content and weightlifting education products. Our first online product will be available by the end of the year. So as our listeners, we're inviting you to sign up early and follow along and enjoy early access to what we create.
Yeah, so we're renaming the podcast, but we're going to keep the existing library from OLIF Podcast. So don't worry about that. And we're also going to keep our episode types. So we're going to keep doing deep dives into specific topics about quirky weightlifting things that you guys love. We're going to keep doing amazing interviews with people, and we're keeping up with our competition previews and just interesting content that comes up to us.
New social media and website are coming for Lifting Curve. If you go to liftingcurve.com, you can join our email list and stay informed on everything that we're doing.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the OLIF Podcast, the final episode of OLIF Podcast before we go to Lifting Curve. I'm Anton Jefferson.
And I'm JP Nicoletta. And today we have with us, for a second time, James Tatum. We decided to bring James on because our idea was to talk about the progress of U.S. weightlifting and of our world team and how we're doing, from the beginning of the 2013 to 2016 quad to the new one. We have worlds coming up, and we were going to do like a full comparison and talk about all this progress stuff, but we got James on and we wound up just having a conversation with James. He's got a new book coming out, or he's got a new book out, and he got into quite a bit of his experience and how he's progressed and a lot of the things that he's seen and done over the years. And we weaved in some of that discussion of US weightlifting, but it's always a lot of fun to talk to James, and we hope everyone enjoys our last episode as OLIF, and we will be back with new episodes as Lifting Curve in the near future. I hope everyone enjoys. Mr. James Tatum is back. James, we're happy to have you with us again.
Yeah, always a pleasure to be on, guys. Thanks.
Well, are you back to full training? I know obviously you had to pass on your last two international trips. You had the shoulder thing, but how's everything going? You feeling better? Or when can we hope to see you again?
Yeah, so I kind of took a slow approach back, just so we don't exasperate the injury, especially this year is the year after the Olympics. Mm-hmm. So, this is the year to take it slow. What the injury that I had was it's kind of an odd injury, and I haven't heard of any other weightlifters that have had this injury, but it was a stretch injury to my axillary nerve, which innervates the deltoid. So my deltoid just got really weak. The only pain was just some compensation things with some of those other muscles kind of seizing up to do the work that the deltoid wasn't. But other than that, it just took, I was really just waiting and letting that nerve re-innervate, and so that I could, get better motor control of my deltoid. It was, really kind of an odd injury, and it just takes a lot of time to wait. But now I am starting to push the actual weightlifting movements a little bit more. Starting to do snatch and clean and jerk 3 times a week now instead of once.
Yeah, well, slow is smart. Even though you've been recovering, you have not been without stuff to do. You recently released the new ebook, The Prepared Weightlifter. Focus specifically on GPP or getting people prepared to train in weightlifting. And why don't you tell us a little bit about the book itself and what you were thinking when you picked what I think is really a specific topic. And I don't know that I've seen anything published to address it quite the way that you've done it. So tell us a little bit about what you did.
Man. That was kind of the idea. The Physically Prepared Weightlifter was the name. I hadn't really seen a whole lot of GPP. Making my switch from, the powerlifting and sports performance world, that was one of the most interesting things that I saw in the weightlifting community was, they're very effective programs, but they were very, I don't know, they were focused on weightlifting as the sport of weightlifting. So I like to think of weightlifting as a few different ways. You got your strength coach, you've got your technique coach, and you got your competition coach. And everything that I saw in weightlifting was very focused on like the technique and the competition coach. And there wasn't really a whole lot of stuff about strength. Of course, you're going to get freakishly strong if you do weightlifting, just because the nature of, squatting, snatches, and clean and jerks. But, let's say you've got like a football player, their sports training is out on the field. They'll get some significant strength gains from being in that atmosphere, but they also supplement it with the weight room. And in a way, like there was no weightlifters that were doing that part of training. I kind of saw that void, and I thought that's one of the major reasons why I made such a fast improvement in weightlifting, because I made the switch from a different sport, and I made my first world team 2 years later. I thought it'd be helpful to start talking about it, put some methods down for people to try, and to get the benefit of that.
2 years, your first world team. That world team was 2013. Look back and talk a bit about how we've done, we Team USA has done in terms of progress and where that progress has come. And, I think that you were great to join us on this conversation because you made your first world team in 2013. You've been a big part of the progress that we've made over the quad. And I think you've seen and experienced a lot, both inside the US and internationally. So your perspective as we go through this, I think could be really a lot of fun to unpack.
Things have changed a lot. And I think it's just an exciting opportunity to go back and revisit from, the perspective of a guy who lived it. My first question would be, James, is how did it feel to make the 2013 World Weightlifting, team for USAW?
That was a lot of fun. I think I was pretty close to not making it, but it was actually something with the selection procedure. And I thought that, a meet that actually qualified me, I didn't think it did. So I was actually kind of surprised. And it was like, oh, I made the world team. This is pretty freaking cool. It was kind of a fast progression. So I was still in that stage where I was just making, really big improvements in my weightlifting from meet to meet. I had done the Pan Ams earlier that year, so I kind of got a little bit of experience on the international stage. But, really, I just looked at it as like this big learning experience, learning how to compete at the international stage.
Interesting. I'd like to come back to your book and ask one more question before we go any further. I had a question because one of the guys who preached about like GPP always was Don McCauley. And I wanted to know, like, what's your influence for your book from Don McCauley, if any? And how did he help prepare you as an athlete as you were, being coached by him as one of the coaches at MDUSA in your time?
I think the biggest influence that Don had on me as a coach was his unique perspective on technique. And he looks at things differently than a lot of the other coaches. I mean, hence why there's so much controversy around Don's weightlifting technique, the whole catapult thing. But then in reality, for the people that have worked with him a long time, it's really nothing crazy that he's saying. He's just looking at it from a completely different way. And, it was kind of useful to learn that outlook. But
I think context is a big deal there too. You had context when you were talking to him, whereas when you mentioned controversy, I don't think it's really a controversy with him, but yeah. he sometimes like that context gets lost when some of the comments come out.
Yeah. So it's that was the coolest thing that I got from Don. And I actually, more of my GPP. This is kind of funny. When I mentioned Don and how the contents and the way he looks at things is different, one of the big influencers that I had for GPP is from my powerlifting and sports performance days. Mm-hmm. So the big ones were like Charles Poliquin, Louis Simmons, and some of Glenn's stuff in there too. So there's more influence from those coaches in the GPP. But Louis Simmons, that's one of the main things that I liked about him, is that he looks at things, just the way he thinks is completely different than the normal. Like it's, some people see like the way everyone else in the United States looks at powerlifting is like through the eyes of an artist. and then he looks at it, or through an engineer, and then he kind of looks at it through the eyes of an artist. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of funny to see how he came to these conclusions and like his thought process. But my point is, I think it's cool to look at things through that different way, and that's what Don did.
Okay. So coming back to the 2013 World Championship team, first time in Poland, I'm assuming, right? Yeah. How was that experience? Like, lay it out for us, people who have never competed at an international stage. This may be the closest thing we get to it. So,
yeah. So you make the team, you fill out all the paperwork for USA weightlifting. You get your visas, make sure your passport's all good and all that. So there's kind of a lot of buildup. They send you out a package. You get the singlet. They send you out a pair of shoes, which I always think that's kind of silly to send you out a pair of shoes a month before you compete, because you can't go and wear new shoes. You got to break them in. But, you know, what we always did is we would just use them for the next competition, you know, let them break in. And then, you know, finally you pack up, get on this long flight, and you fly over there to Poland. I think we flew on Lufthansa.
Yeah,
which is
German airline is amazing.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, so like that was probably one of the nicest flights that I've been on. But you know, as we're driving to the competition, I think the competition was in the same building as the 1913 World Championships.
Wow.
Which was 100 years earlier.
Wow.
Which was, you know, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Describe the competition, you know, during the competition, like what you felt like when you got home. Like, was it a successful competition? Do you remember much?
Yeah. Like, what was the vibe? I think from everybody. I mean, was the performance for yourself? I mean, what do you think how you did? And then what do you think the overall tone was from the team on the way back?
The weightlifting, I remember they had works on barbells. That was the first time I had lifted competitively on a works on barbell.
What'd you train on before? Just MDUSA equipment?
Yeah, Pendleys, I guess Alicos, and one, I think it was DHS, but I don't remember. But I hadn't lifted on a works on. You know, it was kind of funny. They had so much whip, like I could feel the whip on the snatch. So that was kind of cool. So it was you know, one of the lessons that I took home from that is that I want to try to train on as many different barbells as I can, just to get the different feel for them. You know, I think a lot of it I learned was, you know, about the taper and about how to, you know, approach international lifting. I had Glenn with me there, so I felt pretty good in the warm-up room. The Zygmunt was there too. It was more of a learning experience as a whole. I don't remember any, like, you know, huge negative or huge positive, you know, emotions on the way home. It was like, okay, I'm learning how to compete at the World Championships. I'm learning that, you know, pretty much what I learned is that there's not really a big difference for me. You know, I have to treat it the same way that I treat those national level meets. And it's when I start treating it like it was too important is when it turned into like stress and mislift.
You know, what's interesting too is that you got that experience. You weren't expecting that opportunity. It opened for you. You took it. And then really the progress for you, I think, started happening once you got home. Like, you reached a certain level and then you didn't let it go. Over the course of like the next 2 or 3 years, I mean, by 2015, the 77s were loaded. Yeah. Right. I mean, it was arguably the best class in the country by the time we walked into the 2015 nationals. Right. I mean, and the other ones evolve and change around, but that was a clear sign to me of something that was interesting, even mid quad, because you made the world team with a total. I mean, I think you would agree. You probably wouldn't have made the world team 2 years later with, instead of just stagnating. I mean, you were pushing your way back onto the world team at a higher level with some other people. I mean, what did you think, or what did you sense with some of the competition around you? And you were training with some of that competition. You know, you had Cooper there with you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's really about, you know, perspective and what your goals were. So my goal was to, you know, get up to those American record weights. You know, I kind of joke around with this is that, you know, when you start out weightlifting, there's not a whole, like, I came from powerlifting, so I was already pretty strong. So I didn't really have a lot of respect for the American records, because I'm like, oh, I can do that. Like, when I first started weightlifting, I saw, you know, like I was in 85 when I started. I think the clean and jerk was 203 still at that time. It was Kendrick's. And I was like, oh, I could deadlift that and I could squat that. Doing a little bit of training, I'm definitely going to clean and jerk more than that. It turned out that wasn't quite the case. But I think that
record's still up there, right?
Yeah, it is. And I didn't break it. I know. The two funny things is I turned out better in the snatch and the way things progress. And but I think that mentality is kind of what helped me, keep pushing through it. Like I didn't have this idea of like, oh, that's a lot of weight. I wasn't intimidated by it. And then I had those numbers as my outcome goals.
I like that. And you're looking at it from the self-goal perspective. At the same time, the competition was leveling up around you. And did that weigh in at all? Did you sense or feel anything from the others? The emergence of Bianco, the decision of Travis, I don't know.
The decision.
The decision.
Decided to come back down. I mean, in 2013, Travis was in the 85s.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stuff happening around you as you were keying in on those goals, right? How did the competition or did it factor in at all in how you approach things?
What was kind of funny is Travis lived with me during that time when he made that decision. And he was a little worried about, how I would react because he knew that was his best decision as a weightlifter.
Right.
But he was also living with the person that was the 77. You know how like that, just competitive on all levels. But he was kind of afraid that his living situation would be affected by his choice to go to 77. Of course, I didn't take it that way, and we just kind of. I don't know. We just kind of pushed each other. Travis and I were great training partners, other than the fact that we were both a little chill. And so, sometimes we need somebody else to get in there and stir up some fire and excitement in training. But for the most part, we got along. We weren't offended. We, worked as a team to do well, both at 77s. And, for a while, it was just 2013, Chad Vaughn beat me at Nationals. And then 2014, I beat this was Travis's first meet as a 77. I beat him just barely. I think I did a 316 or a 324 or something. And we both beat Chad Vaughn. And that was the first time he had lost on U.S. soil in like 9 years or something. And then, just like you said, after that, Angelo Bianco started doing better and better. And, I think until slowly he just had a few of his breakout meets just recently. Leo Hernandez in there too. It just drove that competition up, which was a lot of fun. I still had my my goals. One of I think the big deciding factors between me moving out of the 77s into the 85s is that I hit my biggest total in 2014. After that, I couldn't redo it, even though my training was getting better. Everything was like pointing towards a bigger total in the 330s, and it just wasn't coming together. And it was just because I was cutting too much weight. I'd gained too much, sports specific muscle mass, made it harder to cut the weight. And so then once I moved up to 85, I didn't have that problem. My true strengths kind of showed themselves.
Yeah, and I think you immediately proved that out. I mean, you went from 320s to 340s in the snap of a finger. I remember you feeling pretty happy in Philadelphia when you did it for the first time. It definitely worked out. And now in 2017, even though you had to pull out, I mean, you are one of, I guess, two people that are officially would have been on the team, but Donovan Ford was close. So a quad later, that move has kept you at an international level.
Yeah. And it's funny, in Philadelphia, those weights that I hit were goal weights that I had as a 77. An American record snatch in the 77 and an American record total as a 77, but I just did them as an 85. Those had been my goals, to hit those American records. And that's pretty much how I knew it was the right decision, because literally exactly what was holding me back.
I think if you step back and look at everyone around you now, the team or the group that we've got on both the men's or the women's side, would you match one up against the other? Like, do you think 2017 has a better shot, or has, I don't even know how I want to frame it, but I mean, I think, like, do you look at this team and think in 2017
that we've improved? I would just say that. improvement. I don't think it's definitely, you can make a comparison. I'm going to let James have it, but do you see this as an improved team? Like, did we build upon what you guys have done in 2013?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like you were saying, I think I made the world team with a 306 and in 2013, and as a 77, that would never happen now. I mean, I don't have the exact rankings, but Angelo and Harrison are the 277s on the team, and they made the teams with 330s, 330 pluses. So it's
333 and 332.
Yeah, so it's just like, and for those of you who don't know, 306 versus 332, like, oh, that's only like 20 something kilos. No, that's huge. So of course, it's just wild how much better we have gotten and how much more depth we have as a team. And our top guys are even better, but it's even harder and harder to make it. Everyone's a lot closer than they were before. So, I'm kind of going off topic here a little bit, but
not really. No, you're good.
We've got all these, youth athletes. So for example, senior Pan Ams and senior Worlds was my first international meet. Now we've got these youth athletes that have all gotten experience on the international stage as youth or juniors. And so like, if I'm looking through this list, the only people that may have not ever made an international team, maybe Jordan Cantrell. I'm not sure if he's ever made any youth teams. He may have. He's just kind of made a big jump. And maybe Brian Resnauer for the men's side. And everyone else on that list has made an international team. In 2013, that wasn't the case. A lot of this was like our first international meet. So I think there's that experience. And then there's also, the leadership. They seem to have taken a much more active role in individualizing the leadership in a way versus, not that this was bad, but before it was just like, oh, this is how we do things. We're just going to do the same thing. This is our checklist and we'll go through and do this. And as the sport has changed, as the weightlifting in the United States has changed, they adapted with that. And, now there's the high performance directors, it's just, I don't know, it's just much more organized.
Cantrell did make a junior Pan Ams in 2016. And a junior world team, but that's 2016. That's still new. So your point's not any different with him being mentioned. And the other thing there with the individualized approach from USAW, I think a lot of that ties to the closing of the training center. And I think that you in particular probably took some benefit from the OTC moving on or being phased out.
The decentralized model.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. They're much more willing to help, much less set in stone. This is the way it is. Deal with it. It's more like, okay, this is the way it is, but how can we make it work for you? And so I think it's definitely good. So it is kind of disappointing about the training center closing, but again, just like you said, they've adapted and they seem to be doing well.
It was definitely, it was a lot of people doing things like yourself, like let's take MDUSA, the team, for example, that didn't necessarily need to go to the training center. Like you had that experience in your training center. And so it's definitely, a good move for the future, but talk about how not having a training center has affected like your training or anything like that going forward. Does that take away from like anything that you're doing?
They're still having they have the camps out at Rogue, and in my days of MDUSA, that was really the only experience that I had with training centers was going to camps. I was married and had other obligations, so moving out to Colorado wasn't an option for me anyway. So the training camps is really the only thing that I got out of there personally. And they're still doing that in a way. So in my case, not a whole lot different. The positive, I guess they are, reaching out, trying to set up things for people individually. And, some of that too is just the sport of weightlifting is growing. And so, right now there's more places for me to train. Muscle Driver closed. I can go to, if I drive 45 minutes away, I can go train with Kane Wilkes. Drive another 45 minutes away, I can go train at Harrisburg Weightlifting, which is one of the they got announced as one of the regional training centers, and I forget the exact term that they called it, but so I got one of those real close to me. So it's kind of cool to see see that and have those options open for me.
Ignoring the drama that I think exists right now, present day, with like the nations who are banned and North Korea not being able to make it to this Worlds. I kind of want to chat just a little bit, I think, about what we hope for. What would success look like, I think, coming out of this Worlds? And James, we'll let you do a bold prediction. Where do you see us 4 years from now? Like, what could we hope for over the quad? Because I think we started the quad in 2013 with that crew that you were a part of. We ended the quad with, I think, a lot more depth, and we did win a medal at the Olympics. How do we say that 2017 to 2020 build upon that?
Yeah. So I think, again, that it comes down to that leadership. The athletes are doing what the athletes do. They get better. The sport's growing. The competition's going up. But then that leadership of, USA weightlifting and knowing how to be strategic at these international meets so that our team does better. I think that's going to make a huge difference because they're going in with this team mentality in a way, which in the end, it might be like, okay, you have to, individual athlete, you have to take this weight instead of this higher weight that you wanted to open with. Like, we know you wanted to do that, but this makes more sense for the team. So they're making those decisions, and it's just like, those are the correct decisions. Those are the decisions that I made incorrectly in 2014. And now the athletes, for those of you who don't know, I bombed out in 2014. And, I took some stupid jumps in the snatch, which hindsight, they were stupid jumps. Shouldn't have done that. And that directly influenced how high I placed and how many points Team USA scored to send more males to the Olympics. So now, like, they've got the leadership, and now they've got this, and they know these decisions to not make and the things to make. Let our athletes be able to express how good they actually are, if that makes sense. Yeah. As far as rankings internationally. Yeah. So, of course, I'm hoping, this year, top 10 would be awesome for the men's team. I think that's, the women's team usually places a little bit higher than the men's team. So it'd be cool to see them in the top 10.
I think there's definitely an opportunity for some medals as well at this Worlds. And, I'm not a big but person.
Still hundreds of other nations.
Other nations aren't there. I'm not blind to that, but look, it's still a Worlds, and anything that we can put together, and competition is still competition. I mean, look at the start list. Not exactly a free path for anybody to anything. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I am looking forward to the Worlds. And then over the quad, I mean, I'm sure you're keeping your eyes open on what they decide to do with the weight classes and how the Olympic qualification system will look. I mean, a full team might only be 3 people. It might be 4 people still. We don't really know yet. So it's hard to project too far into the future. I think next year will be very good.
Are you particularly excited to watch any of the weight classes? Any particular? Yeah. 77, 85. Yeah. Anybody inside? Are you strategically planning, your next move, or are you just, looking and rooting and hoping that, obviously the Team USA does their best as well?
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest difference that I've had is going into this quad is more of a team outlook, as opposed to, strategizing my own position at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I'm just hoping to see a lot more made lifts. But as far as, people that I like to watch, this list, Sarah Robles is always fun to watch. But, as a whole, this might kind of sound funny, but I'm not a big fan of a lot of international weightlifters, just because I look at them more of as my competition. Yeah, I don't know, 77s, 85s, women super heavyweights.
Well, you can leave the fandom to us. That's why we're here.
Definitely. Well, James, thanks for joining us on the show, man. Before you go, and where can we find you online?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at James Tatum USA. My website is jamestatumusa.com, and on Facebook, James Tatum Athlete.
All right. Well, James Tatum, now author of The Prepared Weightlifter. We thank you again for taking some time to come chat with us.
Congratulations again on the book, man. That's pretty awesome.
We hope to see you in competition again soon, James.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you for joining us on the OLIF podcast. We will be back soon as Lifting Curve. If you want to learn more about Lifting Curve and what we're doing, please go to www.liftingcurve.com and sign up for our mailing list. Feel free to reach out to us at JP at Lifting Curve or Anton at Lifting Curve. Thanks so much, and we'll be back soon.